ERP implementations the right way, how Agile is leading to digital transformation failure, and how to localize your AI strategy. Those are just a few of the topics we're going to cover here in episode number 190 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 190. My name is Eric Kimberling, CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. This podcast is about everything related to digital transformation, including the people, process, technology, and strategy sides of transformation. And joining me, as always, is our co-host, Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great episode planned for you here today. Transformation Ground Control is the name of the podcast. It's also the name of the website you can go to, transformationgroundcontrol.com, to see all the past episodes of this show. You can also subscribe to it on whatever platform you listen or watch, and you can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday. It is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting Group and produced by Major Tom Productions. So thank you for being here today. We've got a great show for you. We're going to cover a lot of different stuff, as always, all stuff related to digital transformation, though. We're going to get into some social media questions to start here in just a moment, some questions we've received on our social media channels. And then we're going to get into some newsworthy topics. We're going to talk about how GM is laying off more than 1,000 employees in its software and services division. And then we're also going to talk about how nations are developing sovereign AI strategies to ensure their AI systems reflect local values, languages, and regulations. So we'll talk about the localization of AI strategies there as well. And then later in the show, we'll have our main guest here. Our main interview guest is Brett Bobi, who's an author and consultant in the digital transformation and ERP space. And he's going to be on the show talking about ERP implementations done the right way. You know, what is the right way to do an ERP implementation? That's what we're going to talk about later today. And then finally, after Brett's on the show, we are also going to talk about how Agile leads to digital transformation and ERP software failure. So you'll want to stick around for that very controversial topic, and be curious to hear your thoughts on that discussion here from the audience. So before we jump in and get to our newsworthy topics and our guest here today, Darian, what social media questions have we gotten here recently?
Yeah, so our first one is, I still don't understand why the market is allowed to just say S4HANA and pretend like it's one product that is so great. Their chief product officer is quoted saying S4HANA public and private clouds are two separate products. He's also quoted saying they only plan to build 70% of the functionality a business needs, and that partners in other companies should not build out the remaining 30%. Eric, what are your thoughts on this? Do you agree that the market pretends like S4HANA is just one product, or are you kind of on the other side of that?
Well, I think it's interesting because SAP used to be known for having its own single product or single ERP system that was built from the ground up themselves. But in more recent years with the S4HANA platform, in particular, SAP has taken a different approach where they've become somewhat of a multi-system vendor. You know, they've got not only different versions of S4HANA with public and private cloud, as you mentioned, but they also have different systems that are required to bolt on to S4HANA to get it to work as a fully functioning, robust ERP system. So you look at some of the acquisitions SAP has made with Ariba on the procurement side and Concur on the time and expense reporting side, and SuccessFactors within HR tech and HCM. You know, those are just a few examples of some of the systems that SAP has acquired and bolted onto or attempted to bolt onto S4HANA. And to your point, even that, whether you're public or private cloud with S4HANA, even if you've sort of honed in on one version of S4HANA, you still have these other systems that you've got to plug in to make it work. So I think it is a little misleading to say it's one single system or one throat to choke or a fully integrated system, because it's really not. There are multiple systems, multiple versions of S4HANA as well.
For sure. That makes sense. So I guess this person had a point to, saying that, it's not just one product, it's multiple different products. And that's
Yeah,
what the market should, I guess, recognize.
yeah,
Our
I would
second
agree.
social question today is these rankings are getting crazy and so frustrating, obviously, because my business isn't even on the list. And seems like SAP people just put everything in one S4 bucket and pretend like it does everything. So this is kind of like the same type of question, I guess, or comment that, the SAP people are thinking the S4 HANA bucket is just one thing and that one thing does everything. And then what the ranking is for, that ERP system as S4 HANA isn't just one thing.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a good relevant point that not only applies to SAP with S4HANA, but it applies to other vendors too. A lot of vendors are out there, selling a single product or a single branded product, you should call it. Like for example, yeah, Infor has Cloud Suite. If you do an Infor Cloud Suite implementation, you're usually not implementing just one system. Usually it's multiple systems. You've got certainly some of the newer stuff that's been built within Cloud Suite, but then you still have Infor M3, for example, that's a legacy product that is required to have certain functionality that hasn't yet been built in Cloud Suite. So, in the case of Infor and Microsoft is the same way. The Oracle Fusion as well. You've got multiple systems you've got to sort of patch together to get it to work as one fully functioning system. I think ERP vendors are actually becoming more of a best of breed model of vendor than they have in the past. I mean, you just, with this quick adoption to the cloud or this quick pivot to the cloud that these vendors have made, they just haven't been able to rewrite their software fast enough to create a single system. So it's understandable why they're doing it. Plus, the world is changing so fast and they want to be flexible and provide, a multitude of solutions to customers. And oftentimes the way they do that is they go out and acquire other systems and then they try to piece that together, patch it together with their core ERP system. So, vendors strategically, I don't think they've come out and said this, but it seems like a lot of software vendors are pursuing more of a best of breed model, but then they turn around and try and sell it as a single fully integrated ERP system. Not just SAP though. It's a lot of software vendors doing that same thing.
For sure. How could people be aware of that when, vendors are trying to sell them something?
It's a good question. I mean, when you're getting your RFP responses, for example, you want to make sure you have the vendor specify what module or what system is going to satisfy your different requirements. And certainly when you get demos from the vendor, you'll want to clarify whenever a demo is switching between products or showing different bolt-ons or modules that you may not be aware of, you just want to make sure you're asking those probing questions to understand what you're being shown and what system is required to support what you're being shown in a demo. So those are two different ways. In the RFP responses as well as in the demos, you can be clarifying with the vendors what system is it that you're showing me and selling me, so I know what exactly I'm getting or being offered.
For sure. That's some really good advice, I guess, for people, if they're in that process of getting their RFPs back or in that demo process. Different companies can watch out for those things that vendors maybe aren't going to clarify necessarily for them without any questions asked. But those were some really great questions. I know in the future we'll probably have really a lot more great questions as well, but I'm excited to get into the newsworthy topics today.
Yeah, I've got a couple of them that you're going to get to here in just a moment. We're going to talk about GM and its recent layoff within its software and services division. And then we're also going to talk about AI strategies to localize your AI technology to reflect local values, languages, and regulations. And then later, after we get through those newsworthy topics, we'll have Brett Bobi on the show, who will be on to talk about ERP implementations done the right way. We'll talk about what the right way means and what you can do to ensure that you're following some of these best practices and key success factors in your ERP implementation. And then finally, after Brett's on, we'll also talk about how Agile leads to digital transformation in ERP software failure. So be sure to stick around for that. We've got a lot more to cover. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting, and I want to invite you to join our annual tech agnostic conference called Digital Stratosphere. Digital Stratosphere is a conference that features some of the industry's brightest minds, greatest thinkers, and it's a great opportunity to network with peers, other industry people, other CIOs, other project team members that are going through digital transformations or ERP implementations. We've got a great lineup of speakers this year. It's a 3-day event, a lot of great entertainment, networking opportunities. I'll be there as one of the keynote speakers, along with some of my favorite speakers in the industry as well, both within Third Stage Consulting, but also outside the company as well. So I encourage you to check it out and learn more. You can go to stratosphere2024.com to learn more about the event. You can see the agenda, the way it's shaping up, and you can see some of the past testimonials of people that have attended. And the event is October 2nd through the 4th, 2024. It's going to be based in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver, beautiful downtown Denver in the fall, which is a great time to visit Denver if you haven't been. Again, stratosphere2024.com. Check out the agenda. Check out our early bird pricing for passes. And the other beautiful things, if you can't be here in person in Denver, which we hope you can, but if you can't, you can also join remotely as well. We have virtual passes available as well, so you're able to join from wherever in the world you might want to join from. So stratosphere2024.com, check it out, and I hope to see you there.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 190. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. So you can also see past episodes of this show too at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting Group, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients through their software selections and implementations. So be sure to check us out at thirdstage-consulting.com. So you've got a couple of newsworthy, interesting topics here for us. Darian, what have you got in store for us?
Yeah, so this first one is an article that discusses General Motors laying off more than 1,000 employees in its software and services division, signaling a potential shift in the company's digital transformation strategy. The reason this is kind of a big deal is it's interpreted by the industry observers as a sign that GM and possible other enterprises are reconsidering their approach to software development and leaning more towards outsourcing rather than maintaining large in-house teams. So maybe they're starting to see this, micro trend of these large companies starting to outsource a lot of these things rather than having, a large in-house team. Eric, what do you think are long-term implications of GM's decision to lay off software workforce in favor of outsourcing, and how might this affect their digital transformation goals?
That's a good question. I mean, I think there's a couple different ways to look at it. I mean, one is that by eliminating staff and outsourcing, they're reducing their cost structure and their fixed cost structure is decreasing, and now they're presumably spending a little bit more, but more on the more flexible side of the cost equation, to where it's not fixed costs, it's not salaries, they don't have benefits and all that stuff they have to pay on top of it. So I imagine that's probably why they did it, or that's a part of why they do it. I know publicly traded companies oftentimes are under that pressure to reduce their fixed costs, even if it means they're just going to shift that spending to outside spending with partners. So financially, I can kind of see, why they would make that decision. I guess strategically, though, if you think about this, them being a car company that's trying to build a competency like Tesla has, if you look at Tesla and how they've not only built cars that appeal to people, but they've built technology within their cars that people seem to really like, and it's technologically advanced. And I think it's more advanced than most, if not all, car manufacturers at the moment in the marketplace, just based on my opinion and my limited knowledge of the auto industry. But I think the interesting thing, though, the interesting question I have is, are they trying to build this out as a way to differentiate themselves, to make, people want GM cars more because of the technology they have? They could do that by outsourcing that development of technology, but by outsourcing it, you're sort of outsourcing that potential advantage. So, versus like you look at the Coca-Cola model, where they've always been known for kind of fiercely protecting their IP and the recipe behind Coca-Cola, because that is their competitive advantage. They didn't outsource the development of the product. They didn't outsource, really anything when it came to the product, because that was their core advantage that no one can replicate now. So it makes you wonder, like, is that the right approach for GM? Financially, maybe, as we talked about, but strategically, I don't know. I kind of question whether or not that's the right answer longer term. And it almost seems like they're viewing the technology piece as, not an afterthought, but just something that they can outsource versus building that competency in-house and building that as a competitive differentiator longer term. Seems like they're not doing that. So makes you wonder why you spending all this money if you're just spending money on something that could be easily replicated by someone else. So that'd be my knee-jerk reaction to it.
Yeah, it might be a big kind of risk, I guess, compared to, benefit towards the company. They're taking more of a risk by outsourcing, it kind of sounds like.
Yeah.
But with this also, what do you think, or how do you think other companies might react to this strategy of GM outsourcing versus keeping an in-house team?
Well, it could be an advantage, or an opportunity for other auto manufacturers to build this competency themselves, because if they can build it themselves and do it better and maybe compete better with Tesla on the technology side, then you look at someone like GM who's outsourcing it. I imagine there's an opportunity here for another auto competitor to do a better job than what GM might do. So that, and again, this is bait. I have no idea what their internal strategy is or how they make these decisions, but just sort of outside looking in, that'd be my thought around it.
Right. Yeah. Of course, we can't see what, their thought process was behind it, but we can maybe watch how other companies start to take advantage of this maybe, or what other companies start to do, whether they start outsourcing as well or keeping, bigger in-house teams.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we're going to switch gears here and go to our second newsworthy article of the day. This article discusses how nations are developing localized AI strategies to ensure their AI systems reflect local values, languages, and regulations. NVIDIA supports this trend by launching neural interference microservices, otherwise known as NIM, to help create and deploy generative AI implementations tailored to specific regions. These services include language models trained on local data like Japanese and Mandarin to enhance cultural and logistic accuracy. The move is part of a broader global push for AI infrastructure that aligns with regional norms, with significant investments seen in countries like Singapore, South Korea, and France. Eric, what do you think of NVIDIA's NIM that will have adoption in AI regions like Asia Pacific? And will this move by NVIDIA set a precedent for other tech companies?
Yeah, I think it will. And I think it's something that we see in the enterprise tech space, even outside of AI. You see companies that want to localize the technologies for local cultures and norms and things like that. Certainly regulatory needs get addressed through that localization. So I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think it's only going to increase adoption by taking some of the local needs into consideration. I think that's just going to increase the adoption more widespread with AI in different parts of the world.
For sure. And with that, how do you think these region-specific AI models will influence the competitive landscape between tech giants and AI? Will it lead, do you think, to more collaboration or more competition?
I think both. I mean, I think it's an opportunity to increase collaboration between different partners, but I think it'll also open up more competition at the local level. And there's so much money getting dumped into AI right now on the vendor side. So many investors want to invest in AI startups, and the next big thing like NVIDIA, people want to be a part of. So, there's a lot of money flowing into the space. So I think there's going to be a lot of startups, a lot of competition, but I also think, to your point, there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration in the space as well.
For sure. And with that, NVIDIA's, long-term vision here with these new microservices, how is this a part of a broader strategy to dominate the AI infrastructure market globally? And do you agree or think it was a good move on their part?
Well, I think, it's sort of like, it's interesting because they're localizing in a way that's going to give them more scale, it sounds like. So it's sort of like they're accomplishing both sides of the equation. They're creating something that's local and specific to a market, but they're doing it in a way that's going to allow them to scale, which is the beauty of AI. You've got that back end processing and infrastructure and everything they've built. Now, with that massive scale, you can start to tailor it for different parts of the world. And I think it's going to allow you to do both.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one thing interesting with this is definitely going to be like the ethical side of it. because, every region's going to be a little bit different, on their cultural stereotypes and existing biases in certain areas. So how will AI, be tailored to these specific regions, and what will be the difference between, a region in America versus a region in Asia Pacific region? I think that will be really interesting to see how that kind of develops. But how can companies, ensure these models do not reinforce, existing biases or cultural stereotypes, and kind of stay out of that?
That's a good question. I don't know, honestly. I mean, I don't know how AI is going to handle that, because if you think about it, if we're teaching AI as humans, we're teaching AI and making AI smarter, but AI is contingent or it relies on us feeding it information and knowledge. We as humans have biases inherently and that sort of thing. So how you teach AI to sift through and know where to disregard what we're trying to teach them, or what we are teaching them, maybe unintentionally through biases. I don't know. I'm sure there's people much smarter than me that are working on that topic as we speak, within some of these companies, but I don't understand how or if that'll work here in the near future. But I imagine it's something that has to be addressed in order to ensure the accuracy of the system. And then how do you also not go too far trying to eliminate biases? You go so far that you're actually stifling some of the thoughts or some of the creativity or differing viewpoints or whatever it is. How do you not stifle that part of learning within AI too? So I'm not sure how you find that right balance. I think that's going to be a tricky proposition for these AI vendors.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting to see, how that develops, especially in localized areas, and, third stage being all over the country in APAC and EMEA and US. It'll be, or, North America, it'll be really interesting to see, what we're hearing from clients, specifically all around the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you work for an AI vendor, if you have answers around this, I'd love to hear your thoughts too from the audience. If you know how, or if you have opinions on how you think vendors should be handling that side of things, as far as biases, localization, cultural nuances, all that stuff. I'm curious to hear the audience's thoughts here, because this is all kind of new to me too. So be interesting to hear what you guys have to say too.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, good. That's good stuff. Thanks for sharing those two newsworthy items. Those are both things I was not aware of until today. So thanks for sharing that stuff. And we're going to continue the learning journey here today as we learn more about digital transformations. We're going to shift gears and bring on our first guest here after a quick break. We're going to bring on Brett Bobi, who's going to be on the show as an expert in the space. He's an author. He's a consultant. He's someone I've worked with for probably 12 or 15 years now, is when I first met him a while back. So we've both been in the space for a long time, and he's going to be on the show talking about ERP implementations the right way, what makes an ERP implementation done the right way, what causes failure if you don't do those things. That's all the stuff we're going to talk about here in just a moment. And then after Brett's on the show, we're also going to talk about how Agile is destroying digital transformations, contrary to popular belief. And really look forward to having that conversation here as well. So be sure to stick around. We're going to be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Just tell me what you've got to say to me. I've been waiting for so long to hear.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me, or visit our website for more details.
Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting and your host of Transformation Ground Control. I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or free guide that we published. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management, or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you, or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. you can find a link to take you to the page that'll allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode.
I could never be the right kind of girl for you. I could never be a woman.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 190. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also find past episodes of the show at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, an independent consulting firm that I work for. I'm the CEO of, and that consulting firm, Third Stage, does software selection and implementations for clients, everything related to digital strategy. We help clients reach the third stage of their digital transformation journey. So thanks for being here today, and thank you for looking into Third Stage Consulting as well. And I'm excited for our guest here today. Brett Bobi is someone I've known for a long time. He's an author, he's a consultant, he's a project manager, he's an influencer, he's all these different things in the space. He's done a lot of good work in the space over the years, and he has a fairly popular and prolific blog out there called ERP Implementations the Right Way, or ERP the Right Way. And it's a blog that I think he started over a decade ago, or maybe close to a decade ago. And you can actually read that blog by going to erptherightway.com. That's the website that contains the blog. He's also published a book. He's been a program manager. I'll let him explain his background better than I can. But with that all being said, to talk about ERP implementations being done the right way, joining me is Brett Bobi. Brett, thanks for being here today.
Hey, thanks so much, Eric. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great to see you again. Great to have you here for the first time on the podcast. And for those that don't know you, though, maybe tell us a little bit about you and your background and how you grew up in this space.
Okay, sure, absolutely. My name is Brett Beaubouef. I live in Castle Rock, Colorado. However, you can tell by the accent, I'm not a native Coloradan. I'm actually from Louisiana. I've been up here for the last 25 years. Just love the mountains and backpacking and hiking and all that good stuff. I had the opportunity to start in the ERP industry about 28 years ago. I was actually working for a customer, Texas Instruments. We were doing an ERP implementation of PeopleSoft Release 3. And that was my first taste of doing ERP implementations. Loved it so much. I started becoming a consultant. I worked my way kind of up the food chain. So I started as a technical consultant, then functional consultant, solution architect, then project manager, program manager, and then director. So also during that time, I had the opportunity of being a IT director for an ERP implementation, and was able to see that perspective from a after go live support. Also spent some time in Oracle doing business value realization, where we actually would come back after the implementation and see how the business metrics have improved. Also, what were some of the KPIs that the customer wanted to focus on, and then come up with plans as far as incrementally hitting those KPIs. And then currently right now, I'm kind of at large looking for my next project, but the last 2 years I spent getting back into project management, and it really leads back to my passion, which is writing on ERP implementations. I'm a kind of person that I need to have hands-on experience and always be involved in something to get the right and the best perspective. There's a lot of content that's out there, Eric, but when you live it, when you do it every day, I think that gives you some credibility. I think that helps you to focus on the key critical path of things that you need to do as a consultant. Also, just understand the ramifications of realities that you have to deal with. There is the theory of this is what you should do, but a lot of times it's you got these constraints that you have to deal with and still work within that in order to be successful. So that's a little bit about myself. Right.
So you and I kind of grew up or started growing up in this space right around the same time, 25 years ago. And you early on, I only say this because I've been reading your stuff for a long time. And in fact, I think that's how I first came to know you probably 12 years ago or something like that, maybe
Mhm.
longer. But tell us about this blog. You started a blog called ERP the Right Way, and you've had this blog for a long time. You've published a lot. You're very prolific in the space. Tell us about the blog, what inspired you start it, when you started it, all that good stuff.
Okay, well, I'll take you a step before that. And it was an opportunity, sometimes whenever, you're let go from a job, it's hard to see that as an opportunity. But I really saw that as an opportunity. I was ending up a particular effort and I had this additional spare time. So I wrote a book on ERP implementation best practices. And having that time off gave me the opportunity to do that. Now, during that time, I kind of grew up in ERP from different roles and perspectives. And that I think helped me to have different insights that I wasn't seeing out there in other books. So that was my passion that was really driving me in writing that book. So wrote that book, and then as you write a book, you step back for a couple of years and you look and say, you know what, I could have said that a little better. Or you know what, I learned something new here. And instead of, writing another book or another edition, I said, I tell you what, let's start with a blog, because I wanted to have some interactions with my audience and more real time to get feedback to, give me guidance in terms of, okay, this is helping me versus this is not helping me. So I started a blog called ERP the Right Way. I've been blogging for about 8 to 10 years. And I do about 4 postings a year. And again, knowing the proliferation of information that's out there, I really wanted to write something that had meat on it, that, different players, whether it be an executive making key decisions, an SI partner, a consultant, or even the vendor, could look at this, read this blog and say, get something out of it. So because of that, I spend more time than I think most doing research, doing insight, seeing what's already out there, because I don't like to repeat or provide a unique perspective that some people don't see. And I've been doing that and enjoy it. I love sharing my knowledge. It's my hobby. It's one of my many hobbies. Wouldn't necessarily say it's it's the greatest. It's an exciting hobby, but it's something I like to do and enjoy. Is to share information with others, and as I get that feedback, I learn to be a better consultant.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're very good at it. That you're good at explaining pretty meaty topics in a fairly simple and easy to understand way. And we're going to get into some of those threads and some of those themes in some of your work here in just a moment. Before I jump into my first question, though, for you, Brett, my first question about your work, I want to say hello to the audience here, just some of the people that have commented where they're joining from today. We've got James from Hereford, UK. Thanks for being here again today, James. Carol Ann from Ontario, Canada. Alcinda from Johannesburg, South Africa. Andy from Minneapolis. Victoria from Canada. Thank you all for being here today. Hardik from Copenhagen, Denmark. Frank from London, UK. Zulfikar from India. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to try pronouncing this, and I apologize. I'm going to call you Uba, even though that's not your full name. I'll say Uba from Dubai. Thank you for being here today. Tamara from South Africa. Thank you. So great audience here today. Thank you for chiming in where you're joining from today. People all over the world here to hear this conversation here today, Brett. So thanks for the audience for being here. And of course, thank you for being here, Brett. So let's start with understanding what it means when we say ERP the right way. I'm going to use air quotes here. The right way. There's a right way and there is a wrong way. I mean, believe it or not. I mean, it almost sounds too simple to be true, but it is true. I mean, there are things that if you do things the right way, you're a lot more likely to be successful than the common mistakes that are made. But when you've emphasized the importance of doing ERP the right way in your work and just your experience and your writings, what does that mean? I mean, what does that mean, and why is it so critical to organizations?
Eric, that's an excellent question, and I really thought long and hard about it. At first it sounded like a catchy tune,
right?
And and I said, "Oh, I can see Eric doing air quotes on this." It's really doing right by your stakeholders and your partners. It's doing the right thing.
Mhm.
And I know it probably says, well, that doesn't sound complicated. It's really not. Again, there's a lot of information. We've been doing ERP implementations for the last probably 30 years. And you and I, and I'm sure all of these experts on the call today, we can go through and identify pains and problems and challenges. There's nothing new under the sun. But doing it the right way. Now, I'll give you some examples of what I mean by that. And I really, and forgive me, I'm kind of a passionate person. And it really, especially comes to this, I get a little passionate. It's doing right by your stakeholders and your customers. So, case in point, let's talk about the three key players in an ERP implementation. Let's start with customers. Okay, so customers. There's still quite a bit of ERP software selections and decisions that are made subjectively,
Mm.
not objectively. And, that always sends inappropriate or wrong expectations. Sooner or later, that'll come back to bite you. So that's one area that customers may not put in the effort needed to fully realize and have an objective means to see all the different perspectives of software. And when I say software, it's more than software. Software is just a small piece of it. It's more services. What kind of services are going to be there since we're going to the cloud? It's knowing and understanding that, seeing that larger picture. From an SI partner perspective, it's about having the right people on the job. And it's also knowing and realize that an ERP implementation is not a part-time project.
Mm. Yeah.
It's having people dedicated. And what I mean by dedicated, it's not like, okay, you get a name resource, but they're spending the majority of their time working on that project. I can ask you as a customer, do you feel comfortable having maybe a dedicated name, but they're only working 50% on your ERP project? Odds are no.
Right.
So it's making that investment there. From a vendor perspective, and you can tell it's also about having shared risk and rewards.
Mm.
You look at most of the contracts that are out there today with major ERP vendors. Most of the risk is with the customer as far as that implementation be success. The SI partner has some, but the vendor doesn't have necessarily much stake in the game. It's still like the old traditional, if you remember the on-premise, I'll sell you the software and then I go away. Still, some of that mentality is out there. And I know Constellation Research did a paper last week talking about where they were starting to see customers get a little more frustrated that they weren't getting the value out of their ERP investments.
Mm.
So making that stretch, I think it's important whenever you do talk partnerships. It's a real partnership. That means shared risk and rewards. For SI partners, that means having dedicated people working on that project, also focusing on the end goal of not necessarily, it has to be more than contract obligations.
Right.
If your goal for success is fulfilling your contract obligations, that's not in the, yes, it's partially in the best interest of your customer, right? That's something you have to do legally. You're bound by it. But really, to get them successful, you have to stretch, go beyond that. And my blog is talking about here's these areas where we need to stretch. I know a lot of times we feel that there are shortcuts in ERP implementations, especially going to the cloud. There are not. You can have your tools, right? And you can have, I have my own methodology Well, fine, Eric, you and I, we can sit here, we can develop our own methodology in about 10 minutes, right? That's not going to do it. It's really about the execution, and implementing ERP is hard.
Yeah.
It just is. And having realistic expectations,
Right.
not only in the software, but also as a customer. I know sometimes I see customers where they take on responsibilities they have no business taking on. Like, for example, and you can probably share this as well, organizational change. That's
Mhm.
usually an area that gets negotiated back. End user training, that's another area. Or taking formal training or making the investment of formal training from the vendor. Now, you're depending on the SI partner to do that. Well, that really depends on how good of a trainer is the consultant. And you and I, we were both consultants and we grew up. I don't remember taking a class on how to train your customer.
Right.
You,
Exactly.
you learn it on the job, right?
Yeah.
Some are better than others, but it's not repeatable. So, knowing and understanding that you need to be realistic with what you can and can't do, and make the investments in order to be successful. Um, I think a lot of people know it. It's that topic in the room that no one likes to talk about or kind of overlooks. But sometimes it's that simple, focusing on those areas, and then execution.
Right.
It's all about execution. So
Yeah.
sorry that probably took longer than what you expected,
No,
but
no, I mean, that's pretty impressive. You could answer that such a broad question in such a concise, set of summarized themes there. And you hit a lot of really good points. I'm here with Brett Bobi. We're talking about how to do ERP implementations the right way. We've got a lot more to cover here in the conversation, so be sure to stick around. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Could you whisper in my ear?
I recently published my first book. It's called The Final Countdown: Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. And I wrote this book because I really wanted to find a concise way to share some of my knowledge around digital strategy and how to get started on a digital transformation journey. So in this book, I cover 3 different sections. I cover the people, process, and technology aspects of transformation, with the idea that it's meant to be a starting point, a launching pad for organizations and team members that are going through digital transformations. So I encourage you to buy this book. You can get it electronically, you can get it paperback, or you can get it in hard copy, as I'm holding here in front of you. You can get it by going to thefinalcountdown.com. You can also search for it on Amazon if you shop at Amazon. Otherwise, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. Love to hear your feedback on this book as well. So I hope you check it out and hope you enjoy.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Can I do anything you ever dreamed to be complete? Yes, I'm enough. That's all.
Hello and welcome back to episode number 190 of Transformation Ground Control. My name's Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. This show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting Group, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients through the world with their digital transformation journeys. And the show is produced by Major Tom Productions. And I'm here with Brett Bobi. We're talking about how to do ERP implementations the right way. Your comment about the contracts. Your contract's not going to guarantee success. You could have a fully compliant situation where you've been fully compliant with your contract. Vendor has delivered perfectly to that contract.
right.
And you could still end up with a complete failure on your hands. And guess what? It may not even be the vendor's fault.
Yes, sir.
It may not be that they didn't deliver a functioning, working ERP system. It's the other stuff that's not going to show up in a contract. And it's, you know what I mean? So how do you how do you you talked about educating customers too, or educating clients in kind of understanding their situation, but how do you help clients understand that, okay, vendor did what they're supposed to over here. They did A, B, and C, check all the things on the contract, but there's more to it than that. Like, how do you connect that dots or fill that gap for customers when you're
Well,
working?
you know what? I'm actually working on a blog on that right now, Eric, and actually something that you taught me when we worked together in the past that worked out well is, having in clauses and metrics that make sure that the vendor continues to have skin in the game,
Mm,
if I can say it bluntly like that.
yeah.
Case in point, the key references clause, where you should be able to identify, okay, here are some not key references, key resources. My apologies. Key resources that are on this project. They're always going to be on this project. So no switching out. They're
Right.
always going to be on this project. But also going to that next step, Eric, is a certain minimum percentage. They have to be on there because having that, ensures that, there's that continuation because usually with SI partners, they definitely start off with the best that they have available, right?
Yeah.
And then you slowly build those relationships, but those relationships are more tact, as I call them, not really formal relationships. And if there's a switch in those resources, sometimes you lose that relationship value. And sometimes it feels like you're having to re-explain that again. I've heard that from customers, as a concern that they're having to retell the story over and over again. I think you lose momentum. In a perfect world, there should be a merging, right? But I rarely see that happen. So that's one area that I would call out, and I would recommend to customers to say, "Hey, you know what? Yes, there's some resources that may come in and come out, mostly from a technical perspective, but functionally, and then from a leadership perspective, I have the same people because I'm making an investment of time in these people that are going to help us execute faster." So that's one area. Number two, from a selection perspective, sometimes selection processes, and this is how I grew up, so it may have changed, but a lot of time and effort is spent on the software, seeing the software fit, seeing if they have these functionalities and capabilities. I recently did a LinkedIn survey and asking about what were the common issues and challenges. Over 80%, when I did a summary, it was informal, but a summary had to do with the customer and the SI partner.
Interesting.
Selecting the SI partner has more of an impact than even the software.
Mm,
Selecting the right one. And a lot of times those are in silos because you do the software selection and say, okay, we got the best software. Now SI partners, who should that be? A lot of times that's usually the SI partner that's bringing the business to the vendor.
right.
That's the priority. I would, pretty much insist on the vendor to put some skin in the game. It's like, no, you recommend to me who's the best. I am not going to go through this process again. You're going to recommend who's the best vendor for this. You do that internal analysis. You make that determination. I'm going to put you on the hook for that. And if they don't deliver, that's going to come back to you. Now, some vendors provide. That's a reason why they have, their own professional services arm, right? So they can be that one throat to choke, but that needs to happen regardless. So building in that dependency, I think is important as well. So that's something I'm working on right now, but making the customer aware and ensuring that everyone is having an active part throughout the implementation.
Right.
If not, it's going to be, well, hey, that's your problem. That's not my problem. And I don't think that's the right approach.
Yeah, you get into the finger pointing
Yes,
blame
sir.
game at that point. Really well said. And we've got a lot of comments coming in from the audience too, that I want to comment on here or pull up here. Franco from YouTube says, good guest, Dr. Kimberling. Franco's a super fan. Thank you, Franco, for joining us here today. And Uba on LinkedIn says an ERP implementation is not a part-time project. So true. So well said there, Brett. We're getting a couple questions along these lines, and only you can answer this, Brett, or you can answer this, Beth. This is from Carol Ann on LinkedIn. Says, please put the blog name in the chat. Thank you. And there's been a couple of people asking, like, where do I find your blog? So how do people find your blog, just while we're talking here?
It's easy. So it's www.erptherightway, one word.com.
Okay. I'm going to drop that in the chat as well.
Hey, thanks, Eric.
You bet. Just so everyone has it here, I'll do.
And let me piggyback on that other comment of it's not a part-time project. That's not only a message for the SI partner, it's also a message for the customer. And
Yeah.
if a customer doesn't have a backfill plan, that's a red flag to me.
Yeah.
Because usually you need the best people from a business perspective to be on that project to help define requirements, refine those requirements, test those requirements. And I have seen, by way of trying to reduce the cost of an implementation, to not have a formal backfill plan and just pile on the work, things will drop. So it's not only for the SI partner, but really for the customer, that they need to have a backfill plan and strategy. And if they don't, forgive me for the tough love, but they get what they pay for.
Yeah.
It's,
Well, and what you're saying is so true, because it's not only on the surface about backfilling because you need the hours and the capacity internally. That is important, but it's even more than that. It's more, you, the customer, need to take ownership of this project. You can't just outsource the whole thing to an SI, no matter how good the SI is. You talk about how, and I agree with you, by the way, choosing a really good SI with I don't want to say a subpar system, but choosing the SI is even more important than the vendor you choose, than the software product you choose. And I totally agree with that. But even if you have the best software, the perfect fit for you as an organization, for the vendor, and for the SI, even then you're not guaranteed success. You have to take ownership. You have to be responsible for making decisions and sort of making sure the project stays on track. That's not really your SI's responsibility, but yet a lot of customers think, well, Brett, you're the expert. I'm just going to sort of defer to you. I'm going to outsource this to you. Just handle it. And it's not, no matter how good you are, you're not going to make this successful. It's the customer that you ultimately has to connect those dots.
Exactly. You spot on, Eric. And there's nothing better. You got to have time to transfer ownership or generate that ownership. If they don't have the bandwidth, if they're not spending the time getting their hands on, they're not going to own it. They're not going to adopt it. And that's a good segue, because another key area, because one of the questions that you asked that also got me thinking was, what are some of the, challenges and downfalls with ERP implementations? And I said, oh, goodness. When I looked at it, Eric, I'll be quite honest. I said, oh, good grief, Eric. We could just go to Chat GPT and do a lookup and talk about it. But let me give you a different perspective. Adoption. Well, it's acceptance.
Sure.
Adoption, business results. There's a direct relationship between those three. And if you don't have that adoption up front, you're not going to get that acceptance, and then you're not going to see the business results that you want to see. We talk about top-down ownership, right?
Right.
I feel that we also firmly feel and believe that we need to have bottom up. You think about who has the most impact on ERP implement success once it's live. It's not the executives. It's the end users. Keying in the information, leveraging and using this system correctly or incorrectly, right? they're going to have the largest long-term impact. So it's important that you get them involved sooner rather than later. So if you're not involving your end users until traditionally it's usually done during user acceptance testing, that's too late in my opinion.
Yeah.
You need, and I work with this one customer and their IT organization, and their informal motto was build it and they will run.
Yeah. Instead of they will come, they will run.
And they say, Brett, but it's because users want involved. When people have an opportunity to provide input, it slowly starts building some of that adoption and acceptance. Now, you need to craft that because you can't meet all their needs. You're going with commercial off-the-shelf software package, right? But kind of tailor that and structure that, make them feel part of the project. It's more than just one-way communication. It kind of has to be both way. But that takes a lot of work, a lot of coordination, a lot of effort. A lot of people are just not willing to do that because of the effort and time that it takes. However, when I've done it, I've been very successful. People knew what they were getting and what they weren't getting. They may not be totally happy, and that's okay.
Right.
But from what their expectations were, they knew what that getting, as well as number two, how to be successful for what we were providing them.
Right.
People want to be successful. And if there's a gap, there's lack of information, they're not going to fill that. And they're going to start gravitating towards fear, but also look at what I lost versus, yes, you're losing some functionality capability, but what you're gaining far is going to outweigh that. And I think people are not experiencing the true value of cloud ERP with the rapid updates because they're still focused down here and
Right.
not looking at that bigger picture. And SI partners, as well as the customer executives and ownership, have a huge part in setting that perspective and that expectation.
Yeah. I want to come back to that thread here in just a second. I'd talk about leadership a little bit more. I have a follow-up question for you on that, Brett, but I want to get to the couple audience comments and questions here.
Okay.
This comment here on YouTube is from William. Will says, so they can be that one throat to choke is the quote of the year. So Will agrees with the single throat to choke. He likes that idea. That's always a good one. That's almost as good as your, my favorite quote so far, I have to be honest, is build it and they will run. I've not heard that before. So that's my favorite for this conversation so far. But Carlos on LinkedIn says, so true and applies to all businesses involved impacted by the implementation. I'm here with Brett Bobi. We're talking about how to do ERP implementations the right way. We've got a lot more to cover here in the conversation, so be sure to stick around. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long tail, viral results, and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So, collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
With 1,000 lies in a good disguise, hit 'em right between the eyes, hit 'em right between the eyes. When you walk away.
Hello and welcome back to episode number 190 of Transformation Ground Control. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. This show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting Group, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients through the world with their digital transformation journeys. And the show is produced by Major Tom Productions. And I'm here with Brett Bobi. We're talking about how to do ERP implementations the right way. This is from Vida on LinkedIn. It says contract with vendor is a major concern as they twist as per their way. And it's a good point. Usually vendor contracts are written to favor them. And so you've got to negotiate and make sure you've got your own interest covered in there as well. So, I think the message here is that based on what you said, Brett, I don't think you're saying that contract negotiation is not important. You do need to negotiate contracts.
Absolutely.
But it's not, that alone is not going to save the day. That alone is not going to make sure this project is successful.
No, and if I could stop you right quick, Eric, I'm going to switch roles and I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
Are you starting to see maybe more, or would you think vendors are maybe start having a little bit more flexibility in their contracting because we are, I think, starting to see greater competition in the ERP cloud space? It seems like SAP's finally getting their ducks in a row, and Workday's kind of hitting on all cylinders. I know, what was it, Salesforce with their service now, they were looking at consumption service, contract offerings. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we are seeing a little bit of that. We are seeing a little bit of more flexibility, but I'd say it's not created equal for all customers. I mean, I think a bigger customer is going to get more attention and it's going to get more leverage, enable in changing some things in a contract, or at least adding clauses that protect their own interests. What we see a lot still with the small and mid market is an unwillingness to run things up the chain, or the vendor makes it a really big deal that they don't have authority to change some of these SaaS contracts, and they've got to run it up the flagpole, the chain of command in the organization, and it takes a while to get some of those concessions. So I'd say yes in some ways, but in other ways, the SaaS and cloud model in some ways supports more of a standardized cookie cutter contract, versus the old model of on-prem where you had so many different variables that you'd work into the contract. So in some ways, yes, but I think because of competition, like you said, that is creating some flexibility, but we still see a lot of mid-sized companies that aren't, a household name that every vendor is dying to get as a customer. They don't have quite as much flexibility or as much leverage in the relationship.
That makes sense to me. I think there has to be, because ultimately the customer base is going to, or, market's going to drive this.
Right.
This additional flexibility. And yeah, we're not there yet, but just seeing that evolution, and as well as some additional comments out there, slowly but surely, we're kind of heading in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. Great question there. Here's a question from LinkedIn. And the question is why the management team is not asking to resource the right person for ERP to functional heads. is that issue occur major coordination with vendor? I'm trying to understand it. There's a typo in there, so I'm not quite following the question. But I think the question is about, the management team. You were talking about how management has to carve out resources for a project.
Mhm.
How do you handle that sort of coordination with the vendor, or I guess what's the client's role in working with the vendor once you've designated some of these resources? I'm not sure if that's exactly what you were asking or getting at, Badang, but I'll sort of shift it to what I think you're asking. So what are your thoughts there, Brett, as far as coordinating with the vendor and getting the right resources from the internal team to coordinate with the vendor?
I think we already kind of talked about previously about listing out those key resources
Yeah.
and the amount of time that they're going to be dedicated on that project. That's number one. I'll be honest. Number two, I have no problem talking with consultants and saying, how many projects you're working?
Right.
And sometimes you can, tell us as a customer, if you feel that the functional consultant's on a call, not adding a lot of input, just like a fly on the wall,
Right.
that kind of raises a red flag to me. I'd raise that sooner rather than later. And even if I have that perception, I would want to communicate that to the SI partner project manager, first and foremost. I say, hey, look, I want to make sure that I have their full attention because that's what I paid for and that's what I want. Showing up late to meetings is also one of those pet peeves that I have, but it also shows that, hey, sounds like this guy's just jumping from one customer or one to another. And that just doesn't sound right because I know each customer wants to make sure they get the maximum value and advice and guidance from that consultant. But when you're competing against multiple customers, that's not your problem.
Right.
That's the SA partner's problem. And
Right.
they need to manage that.
Yeah. Makes sense. So you've been talking a lot about leadership so far and the importance of leadership and management and providing the right resources and direction for a project. What about for those that are listening here today that are executives on projects? What advice would you give them for, just what they need to be thinking about as they lead an initiative like this?
A couple of things. Number one is it's important that you share the vision with your team. And you need to share that multiple times. And I almost think of it in terms of kind of an iterative and progressive elaboration of that vision. Because maybe sharing the vision at, say, like at the kickoff, this is what we want to do. We want zero customizations. Everyone's bobbing their head, not really realizing what that means. Where that executive has to reinforce that and further maybe elaborate on that. And that's where working with the SI partner, I think, is very important. I know that when I'm working with executives, I'll be honest, there are messages that I need for them to say. I can say it, it just will not mean as much as the executive doing that. Because taking over that ownership, you think that's a natural process. It's not. And the SI partner needs to guide the executive. And here's how you take ownership. Here's the messages I need for you to communicate. Here's where I need you to be involved. I need you to make a decision here. Also, I'm going to tell you, what I need and when I need it. And I'm going to expect you're going to provide that. If you don't, fine. Just know that your expectations, you're not going to get exactly what you were maybe thinking of at the beginning. And I know and understand that we live in a world of constraints, but heavily engaged in using the executive and far more than just monthly steering committee meetings.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, sometimes say like we're doing a fit gap. Yeah, that's a great time. I was like, let
Yeah.
me bring in the executive. This is where the rubber's going to meet the road. And I'm going to need that executive to say, all right, we said this is what we're going to do, and this is what we need, and then how we need to prioritize things. Because um, even though you are implementing a highly integrated solution in ERP, a lot of the customer organizations are still functionally or siloed based.
Mm.
They don't think across the business process. And what might be good for one group may not be advantageous for another group. And sometimes you need to see it across the business processes because that's what produces the results. Those are the things that executives care about, not necessarily the how, but the result. Yes, they very much care about that, and that's what they're looking at. So understanding that, explaining that, also teaching your executives, here's how I need you to help generate that ownership, that adoption, and make those tough decisions is sometimes to be in the muck with us when
Right.
we're going through this stuff. I think it's very important. And then as a SI partner and as a project manager, I pick and choose. You can't have the executive involved in every meeting. You pick and choose where it's like, okay, this is going to be a meeting that things are going to come to head. Having the executive there and prepping them so that they know the situation, gives you great advantage. It really does.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not as easy as just saying, well, just use the software out of the box, because you just talked about how it could be good for one part of the business, but another part of the business is struggling with whatever, and there's got to be that leadership to say, to either reinforce that, hey, here's why we're going to use the software out of the box. I know this is a big change, but here's why we're doing it. That's part of it. But then there's also, executives do have to make the decision at times, like, do we want to customize? Because yeah, it's not ideal. We said we were going to do a zero customization policy, but that's not always realistic, and it may not be worth watering down our business processes or our competitive advantage just because the software doesn't do it the way we want to. So maybe that sort of leads into another question or a can of worms, depending on how you look at it. But the whole customization versus standardization, how do you see organizations balancing that need or want to maybe customize just that one little piece of the software that doesn't quite do what we want it to do versus, just using the software out of the box and, adapting and conforming to how the software works?
That's a hard topic.
It
Really is. And
Well,
let
I'm
me
asking
share
you,
with
and
you.
I'm not going to answer it.
No, I'll answer it. No, because it needs to be answered. It does.
Yeah, it does.
And it's part of I think an SI's responsibility. You need to challenge requirements.
Yeah.
Again, the SI partner is going to be in a better position of knowing, how to best leverage the software out of the box. Again, you have some historical decisions and philosophies that you're dealing with as well. Say on-premise implementation that you need to deal with. Couple of things I need to do. First of all, to challenge the customer, I have to get permission.
Right.
Unless I'm like Eric, I'm world renowned. I'm a big thought leader. People listen to me. Typically, that's not it. I have to build a relationship. But once people figure out that you care and you want them to be successful, more apt they are to listen to you. So that's number one. Number two, make it objective, not subjective.
Yeah.
Right? Passions are usually involved in customizations.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can take that discussion, make it objectively, and say, all right, here's the business value, here's how much it's cost, total cost of ownership. It does take additional work and hustle. That's getting back to ERP the right way.
Right.
This is not meant to be easy, but if you make that investment, I think you provide more relevant information for an informed decision. Third, never make a decision in a silo. What I mean by that is raise the visibility. So when decisions are being made, it's across a business process. That always means that there's multiple stakeholders involved. Sometimes the best pressure is peer pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And because definitely their colleagues, they have been given the right kind of challenge. And they also have the responsibility to challenge and make a decision in that kind of framework. Ultimately, it's the customer's decision. Your job is to provide the method, that they have a structured approach, that they look at all the angles and make a decision. They still might make a decision where it's personal. And it's like,
Yeah.
hey, the executive said this is what they want. Fair enough. But
Yeah.
this is what you're getting. And
There's risk
here's
that goes
here's
with
the
that.
impact. You own it, but it's our job to make sure they go through that due diligence.
Yeah.
That's how I try to approach it, because it's, some consultants might come in and say it's not best practice, and that can create some resistance depending on the relationship and how it's positioned. I like to take the more scientific approach and say, okay, here's why it makes sense to either have a customization, and definitely customizations as it comes to revenue generating. All for it.
Right.
ERP has best practices, which I know I think you talked about it last week. Nice little buzzword that's out there. All that means it's common.
Right.
It has no competitive practices. Who would share their competitive practices? So
Right.
there is a legitimate need for customizations that you need to consider. But, those are some sites that I leverage and use to kind of determine, this is going to make them more effective and build a better customer relationship with their customers. This makes sense.
Yeah. I'm here with Brett Bobi. We're talking about how to do ERP implementations the right way. We've got a lot more to cover here in the conversation, so be sure to stick around. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting, and I want to invite you to join our annual tech agnostic conference called Digital Stratosphere. Digital Stratosphere is a conference that features some of the industry's brightest minds, greatest thinkers, and it's a great opportunity to network with peers, other industry people, other CIOs, other project team members that are going through digital transformations or ERP implementations. We've got a great lineup of speakers this year. It's a 3-day event, a lot of great entertainment, networking opportunities. I'll be there as one of the keynote speakers, along with some of my favorite speakers in the industry as well, both within Third Stage Consulting, but also outside the company as well. So I encourage you to check it out and learn more. You can go to stratosphere2024.com to learn more about the event. You can see the agenda, the way it's shaping up, and you can see some of the past testimonials of people that have attended. And the event is October 2nd through the 4th, 2024. It's going to be based in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver, beautiful downtown Denver in the fall, which is a great time to visit Denver if you haven't been. Again, stratosphere2024.com. Check out the agenda. Check out our early bird pricing for passes. And the other beautiful things, if you can't be here in person in Denver, which we hope you can, but if you can't, you can also join remotely as well. We have virtual passes available as well, so you're able to join from wherever in the world you might want to join from. So stratosphere2024.com, check it out, and I hope to see you there.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello and welcome back to episode number 190 of Transformation Ground Control. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian, Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. This show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting Group, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients through the world with their digital transformation journeys. And the show is produced by Major Tom Productions. And I'm here with Brett Bobi. We're talking about how to do ERP implementations the right way. There's so much noise around this concept of customization. In what I mean by that is, first of all, on one hand, you have vendors and consultants who say, hey, don't customize. It's a bad thing. And I think we all understand why it's a bad thing or why it can be
Right.
difficult, because it's, it's changing the software to do something it wasn't built to do. You're introducing risk, upgrades become more difficult, testing, you've got to test all this customization stuff. So it adds time and cost to a project. It adds risk. But to your point, there are things that there are times where you do need to customize because to your point, it's a competitive advantage and you don't necessarily want the way the software is built because you have
Right. Or number two, it's a compliance issue. You don't have a choice in
Yeah.
and you got to do it. And then, if you are doing a customization, that's when I would bring the vendor back in to say, hey, look, I expect you to handle, compliance and best practices. So, how can we share that risk since, it's a true gap.
Well, and so you've got to, when you get these customization requests on a project, you've got to sort of decipher or segment the customization request or the demand to customize. So you're going to have, on one hand, you're going to have just resistance to change. People just don't want to change. Therefore, they want to customize the software. That's, to me, different. Like, you set those aside and say, okay, those we're not going to customize. Those aren't based on best practices. It's probably not revenue generating. It's just we as an organization are resisting change. That's okay. That happens. But let's overcome the resistance to change, not change the software. So that's one bucket. Then you've got this regulatory stuff where you just have no choice. You've got to do it. And then you've got this other third bucket, which I think is a little bit more difficult, because this is where you say, okay, this is a competitive differentiator. It is revenue enhancing. It does give us a leg up, and it might be worth us introducing risk and time and cost to the project, knowing that we're going to get more value. And that's the hard, back to your leadership comments. That's where the leadership has to come in and say, we are willing to take on these risks. We understand the trade-offs and we're willing to do it. Here's why we're doing it. You need the executives to make some of those decisions, even though it sounds like a technical decision. It's really not. It's a business decision.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely a business decision. Every customization, because business is a risk.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like sometimes taking the risk is worth it, especially if it's going to give you a larger customer base. But always business. You lead with business, and then the technology is just more about the how.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to understand that even if you do decide to use the standard off the shelf software without customization, there's risk with that too. And I think a lot of times we erroneously think, well, there's no risk if we
No.
there is risk, because now you're talking about, you're imposing more change on your organization. So there's change management issues. You might be watering down some of your past processes. You might have processes that work better in your highly customized environment than they're going to work in the new system. It might be less efficient. And you have to make those trade-offs to say, well, that's okay. We're willing to be a little bit less efficient in this one part of our business, knowing that we have a system that's going to make us more efficient overall as an entire organization. And those are the types of business decisions that we oftentimes overlook, or just assume that it's a one size fits all answer of just don't customize.
Yes, sir. Well said.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just to piggyback here, one comment from the audience on this thread too. This is from Uba on LinkedIn. Uba says, customizations aren't always bad. Done right in the right context can be essential for the success of the project. And yes, there's risk with that, but you're right, Uba. It could be that the risk makes sense and there's more benefit than risk here. Tom on LinkedIn, Tom says, really enjoying discussion around customizations and the role normal change resistance plays. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Here's just a kind of a general comment, and I'm curious to see if you have any thoughts here, Brett, but this is from Vidang on LinkedIn. It says, changing the processes again after the first trial is a sign of further trouble for ERP implementation project, ? So I guess here is, do you see that a lot where customers are changing their processes, changing their requirements, not really sure of what they want to be when they grow up, and that, how often does that end up leading to difficulties or delays on a project?
That could be a key concern. Usually what I do, and I try to minimize that as much as possible. When I work with customers and I make recommendations to them in terms of, what to implement, I tell them to implement at their current business model maturity level. I'm a firm believer that technology by itself doesn't create maturity. So first and foremost, that's part of my driver in terms of why. Evolving requirements, like a net new process, evolving requirements, very hard to nail down. Usually the approach I take for evolving requirements is I kind of do reverse engineering. So because the customer may not know what they want, I'll say, what kind of results do you want? And then slowly, trail back to, okay, what are the features that support that? But that takes additional time versus, I would say, a traditional requirements kind of front-driven requirements approach, because it people don't naturally think that way. They think the other way, give me the requirements and here's the results. It takes a little bit more effort, more time. Is it doable? Absolutely. But I try to minimize that as much as possible. And then number two, take the right approach, because your commenter is absolutely right. You might get a set of requirements. Here's the results. I don't like that result at all.
Right.
That's totally off. And that can really slow down a project, as well as there's so much other stuff that's changing as far as organizational change and risk inherent with just a ERP implementation where you're at today. I see that as maybe too much risk of, hey, you know what? I'll tackle that in a future project. First, I got enough change to worry about. Let's get this down. Let's get this solid. And then let's build upon that. Unfortunately, there's still that mentality with customers that they had, say, if you recall back with the on-premise, Eric, where customers feel either I get it in the first implementation or I'm never going to get it. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask for everything. And the beauty of the cloud is that, hey, you getting frequent updates. You're going to, versus the traditional, okay, every 18 months you get an update, then I have to go through that effort. Then they'll be ready for me to implement the new stuff that they need to implement, or what I need is in this update, and it takes more time. Now it's more readily available, and customers need to see the longer game and be empowered and enabled for that longer game versus trying to get everything they need in the initial implementation. That's the beauty of the cloud is that it's ongoing, that, from a technical perspective, you're always up to date.
Right.
And nothing's stopping you from a technical perspective in pursuing new functionality versus an on-premise. That mindset, I think a good SI has to educate not only the customer from a business perspective, but also from an IT perspective, to say, hey, you have more flexibility now than what you did in the past. So,
right. Yeah, that makes total sense. Here's a question that I think is worth noting, just building on what you were just saying, Brett. This is from Mary on LinkedIn. Mary says, do you start with an MVP? And for those that don't know, MVP is a minimum viable product. And you were just talking about how things are different today, Brett, than they were in the past with on-prem, where you almost felt like you had to get everything crammed into one big bang phase of a project. Do you see this MVP concept working well in cloud ERP implementations, or how do you see MVP, the concept of MVP, fitting into projects?
Mary, that's an excellent question. One of the areas that I like to research and actually know and understand, as we went to the cloud, all of a sudden everybody became agile overnight.
Right.
And
funny how that works.
And it's agile. It's all agile. And MVP is kind of one of those concepts, because one of the value propositions that you get with Agile is that it's faster. In some respects, it can be faster, especially if you're going towards a minimum viable product. Yes, it's about getting software into production. So yes, I do believe in that. I think those are options that are there and available. I'll be honest, my experience when I use MVP is when I get called into troubled projects and the scope's already blown. And it's like, okay, we need to go live by June with something. I don't know what.
Right.
What can we go live with? Then I start looking at that MVP. And but typically my approach is, and I look at it from an adoption perspective. I need to give what the customer has today as much as possible. I know there's going to be areas I'm going to cut, but as much as possible, because I know the customer's going to feel like, okay, we went in the cloud, but I felt like I took a step back. There's some things I lost
Right.
in there. I want to minimize that as much as possible so I can get that adoption and acceptance. Also, number two, the faster I can start getting them towards adopting new functionality, because that's going to be the value. That's where the ROI is really going to kick in. So MVP, absolutely. I just use it as a concept in planning to provide as an option, especially if the customer says, hey, I purchased, and I had a customer like this, they purchased Oracle Cloud 2 years ago, but they haven't done anything with it. Now they're getting charged, and all of a sudden they got their ducks in a row, and it's like, we need to go live with something. Our executives are just pounding the table. We need something. Definitely, I use the MVP approach to say, here are our options. This is something that we can go with rapid. Is it going to be everything you want? No, but it gets you a win. And sometimes just getting a win is a good start.
Yeah. That makes sense. And it's a good way to build momentum, get some confidence in the project, and not bite off more than you can chew right away. It gives you some flexibility there. So sort of looking ahead then, looking ahead to the future here, Brett, what trends do you see shaping the future of ERP implementations, and how should we be getting ready for those trends or predictions that you might have for the future?
Well, there's still going to be ERP failures.
I was hoping you say they were going to disappear.
Yeah, we're still going to be learning the lessons of the past because it's all about execution, Eric, right? And you can have perfect methodology, the right players involved, but if you don't execute, then nothing's going to happen, right? Or you're not going to be successful. I think number two, you're seeing more hype, and you're probably going to, hoopla. Forgive me, sometimes I speak too blunt about AI, right?
Yeah.
Machine learning, automating, but it's going to have siloed or very limited value. And the reason why is the AI beast requires a lot of data.
Mm-hmm.
Now, most of these cloud and most of the AI tools and research and capabilities are in the cloud. However, most cloud offerings are not developed to where there's a complete conversion of the customer's data. It's usually the bare minimum, or maybe a little more, just enough to get them in the cloud that they can operate. So because of that and the limited data that they're going to have, they're going to be getting limited value from that. And it's also, comparing that to the reality of, I got these new AI tools, but I can't make payroll. What's going to come first, right? You're going to keep on the lights, and people need to have bandwidth. It's a new technology. It's a new philosophy, way of thinking. Some of it requires training, right? You're going to have to train the AI tool. There's structured learning, which requires structured data, right? The unstructured, which is really exciting, in my humble opinion, is still in its infancy. And that even requires even more data. So bringing that together, housing that data, also having the bandwidth to kind of leverage and use those capabilities. It's going to look great, but it's maturing to that point to where you could start using AI. So if you look at, say, my favorite business maturity model is the Kinney model, the capability maturity. You have your different levels. So 3 is pretty much, okay, common best practice. 4 is a little bit more quantifiably managed. 5 is, yes, you have an ongoing cycle. You're actually pretty much doing business process management,
Right.
constantly. But moving up that, but say like AI is kind of at the level of a maturity level of a 4 or 5.
Yeah.
So if you're at 2,
You're not going to get value.
it's going to be siloed. It's
Yeah.
going to be very limited. So I think knowing and understanding, it's not only providing the technology, but Mr. Customer, here's how you get there.
Right.
You're not there yet, but if you lay the foundation, you start grabbing this data, you start building that data, you have these standards that you can be successful down the road.
Right. Yeah. That makes total sense. And it's worth looking past the hype. I know we're all enamored by AI right now, but it's also important to look at, well, how do you actually get value out of it? And what do I need to do to get that level of maturity that you're talking about, which I guess the good news is it forces organizations to do what they should have been doing all along, which is clean up your data and
Yes.
have good data. So now I think the good news is forcing organizations like, oh, this data thing really is serious. We actually need to clean that up. So maybe there's some good news here.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, thanks so much for being here, Brett. Time flies when you're having fun, and we cover as much ground as we have. And I know there's a lot of ground we didn't cover. I had
Sure.
several other questions I was going to ask you. We didn't have time to get to them all, but I know the audience had more questions. We'd love to have you on some time again in the future and keep the conversation going, because I think you've got a lot of wisdom, obviously, to share here. You share a lot here today, but you've got a lot more that we could learn from you. So thanks for being here today.
No, and thank you, Eric, for all you do for the industry and sharing and getting out the word. It's really important. And for everyone who participated on the call today, thank you so very much. And feel free to shoot me a question. I'll be honest, I may not even know the answer. 9 times out of 10, I may not.
Right.
But definitely enjoy doing the research, pulling things together, and learning. That's what makes me a better project manager and, more important, project leader, because I like the leadership a whole lot more than the management.
Well, thank you, Brett. Thank you again for being here. Great conversation. And thank you to the audience for some really good questions there. There's some super fascinating comments and questions there. And we've got a lot more we're going to build on here with this conversation. We're also going to get into Agile and how Agile is destroying ERP implementations, just to sort of build on some of the stuff we talked about here with Brett. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So, collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 190. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. This show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. So, Darian, we just had Brett on the show, and we chatted quite a bit about a lot of different things related to ERP implementation success and how to do implementations the right way. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from the conversation?
Yeah, I thought overall, lots of great knowledge that he shared. I think that, his understanding of how to do ERP, the quote unquote right way, adds a lot of value. But I also think, I have some follow-up questions from that conversation. There was a lot of great back and forth between the audience and you guys there. And I want to know, just, expand on a couple more things that we didn't necessarily get your opinion on during that conversation. So first of all, Eric, what do you believe are the metrics or indicators are most important for measuring success of an ERP implementation? And do they differ from Brett at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. We didn't really have a chance to get into that. That was one of a few different topics and themes that I wanted to ask, but we just ran out of time. But it is a good one. It's an important one. And I think, I don't know what his opinion would be or if he would agree or disagree, but I think he'd probably agree. And maybe we have him back on the show to confirm this. But I would say the most important metrics for implementation success are not your traditional typical ones. In other words, I don't think the most important ones are, did we implement on time or on budget? I think those are important. Obviously, you can't run a business and completely blow a budget or completely mismanage a project. But I think the even bigger, more important metric, in addition to that, is going to be the operational impact. So what kind of impact are we having on our business, both positive and negative, as a result of this transformation? And that's the part that organizations tend to overlook. They tend to myopically fixate on, did we implement on time and on budget? And they don't necessarily balance that with, did we deliver value to the organization, or at the very least, did we not screw up the operations of our business? And when you think about how organizations can so easily screw up their implementations and the operations as a result, you think about not being able to ship product, or customers getting irritated with you, or losing customer goodwill, not being able to pay your employees, not being able to close the books. There's all these things that can go wrong if you don't do implementations the right way. And those are the real costs of a project. And those are the hidden ones that end up just completely surprising organizations. But it shouldn't surprise you that, if just because you finish on time and on budget, but the project itself delivered negative business value to the organization, that should never be a surprise. I mean, you should see what's happening and know and anticipate what the real value is. So I think organizations need to spend more time thinking about what happens after we implement new technology. How does the business look? What's the upside? And how do we manage to that downside? Because that's ultimately going to affect ROI more than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And, like you said, maybe we'll have to have Brett back on to see what his thoughts are on that, and if he does agree or disagree, which would be good for the future, I guess. Audience, leave your comment below if you want to hear Brett back on the podcast. But one more question kind of for future trends. I know we didn't really get to this either, but looking ahead, what trends do you see shaping the ERP implementations, and how should organizations prepare for that?
Well, I think just to sort of come back to the way he answered that question, I thought it was interesting that he sort of said what he does not think is a trend. He didn't say these exact words, but this is my interpretation. I mean, he said that he didn't think AI was going to deliver much business value in the short term. So when we think about trends, there's a lot of buzz around AI, obviously, but I like that he's sort of challenging the conventional wisdom there that, yeah, AI is cool, but organizations don't have the maturity to take full advantage of it. And I totally agree with that, by the way. I think organizations have so many bigger fish to fry and so many bigger priorities right now, that just more fundamental priorities, that they need to clean up with their enterprise technology before they can get to that sort of higher level of self-actualization, on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, getting to that high level of self-actualization with artificial intelligence. Most organizations aren't ready for that. They've got to get their ducks in a row first before they take advantage of AI. So I think that was an interesting perspective, but that doesn't answer what I think some of the trends are. In my opinion, I think the best of breed model is going to continue to evolve and become more viable. Instead of the big single monolithic ERP systems, I think you're going to see more of a best of breed approach, especially with AI. I think that is something that AI is going to fuel a little bit more now, is because you can get away with having multiple systems now. When you have something as powerful as AI, it sort of mitigates that risk we had in the past of trying to patch together a hodgepodge of systems. Now you've got AI that doesn't solve all the problems, but it can tie together data and tie together workflows potentially better than a single ERP system could. So I think that's one thing, is that best of breed will continue to evolve. I think data management, data science is going to be super hot for the next decade or longer. So anyone that's going to school right now, if you take a couple courses in data science or get a minor in data science, I think that's going to be super valuable in the future. And if you're already in your career, it's an area that if you learn about it, I think it's going to help fuel or further your career for sure. So those are just a couple things. I do think, my most controversial prediction, I don't think it'll happen in 2025, but I'd say in the next 5 or 7 years, you'll start to see some of the fallout and some of the negative downside of cloud and SaaS adoption, because you're going to start to see that first wave of companies that outgrow their system or decide that they want to start, they've evolved as a company and they need to switch vendors. And I think you're going to see the pain of trying to switch your cloud solution, which is going to be a lot more painful than even switching your on-prem system was, back in the day. So I think that's going to create a lot of maybe a bit of a backlash. And I think the pendulum might swing a little bit away from this all-in commitment to cloud and SaaS solutions. I think you'll start to see some companies want to back off that a little bit and maybe not have so much vendor lock-in and so much committed to the cloud, just because it sort of, I think it's going to hamstring organizational flexibility in the future. But we haven't seen that yet because companies are still going through the adoption of cloud solutions for the first time. So that would be my more controversial, maybe not widely agreed upon prediction, but that'd be one thing I see in the coming years as well.
Yeah, I think all those trends will be really interesting, or all the trends that you think may happen or that we may see the next few years will be interesting to, watch and see what really happens there. And it's same with, what Brett said, along with, not that he thinks it's necessarily a trend, but maybe anti-trend of AI not being used in the near future, at least, or being super effective, or key point that organizations should be focusing on. So I think that's super interesting take as well.
Yeah, and one thing he did mention in this conversation, we talked about toward the end of the conversation, we talked about the MVP or minimum viable product concept that goes along with Agile. And that was one of the threads that we touched upon. And in fact, we're gonna continue with that thread on Agile here in just a moment. We're gonna play you a video clip from my YouTube channel where I talk about how Agile is destroying ERP implementations and digital transformations. And so we're going to play you this YouTube video, which generated a lot of conversation and interest, both positive and negative. We want to play this clip for you and get your feedback. What do you think about this whole argument I make in this video about how Agile is undermining the success of digital transformations? I'm going to play you that clip here in just a moment, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology independent and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. I've included a link to a video right here that describes Third Stage in a bit more detail. It talks about our story, our history, our philosophy, our clients, our service offerings, and that sort of thing. But in general, what Third Stage Consulting does is we're an independent and tech-agnostic consulting provider. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, a ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 190. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And we're going to play this clip here as sort of a closing segment here. We're going to play this clip about Agile and how Agile is not what it's all cracked up to be, and it can, in fact, create risks and problems in digital transformations. And we're going to explain to you in this video why that is and how that is. So let's roll the clip and we'll come back and chat about it. I'll be curious to hear what you think too as you're watching this video. Drop in the chat wherever you're listening or watching to this podcast. I'd love to hear your feedback on what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Would you add additional points to this argument? Let me know what you think. But here's the clip of how Agile is undermining digital transformations. Agile methodologies are all the rage right now. Most software vendors, if not all of them, are using at least a flavor of Agile implementation methodologies when they implement their new technologies. Most software vendors, if not all of them, are using some form of Agile methodologies, even if it's just a hybrid or a variation of Agile. So the question becomes, why is this such a big thing, and why is it such a problem, in my opinion, as it relates to digital transformations? So what I'll do today is I'll talk about, first of all, what Agile is and why it's such a big deal right now. And then I'll talk about why it creates unintended consequences or unintended problems for digital transformations. And most importantly, at the end of this video, I'll talk about what you can do about it and how you can leverage Agile where it makes sense, but not go too far into Agile where it doesn't make sense. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent technology agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our resource center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation. And you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey. Now let's jump back into today's content. Real quickly, I want to describe the difference between Agile and Waterfall. Waterfall is a traditional software development methodology where you have clear sequential milestones and checkpoints along the way. Agile, on the other hand, is more focused on speed to value. It's focused on implementing technology quickly and getting feedback quickly from your user group. And I'm not going to dive into all the nuances of Agile versus Waterfall, but if you'd like to learn more about what Agile is and how it's different from Waterfall, I encourage you to check out this video right here on my YouTube channel. That video is solely focused on just differentiating between the two to help you define which makes the most sense for you. But what I'll do here today instead is talk about why Agile has become such a big deal. And the reason Agile is such a big trend right now is because historically, ERP implementations and digital transformations have failed. Organizations have taken too long to get the value they wanted out of the system. They've spent too much money, too much time, too many resources, and in many cases, they don't ever get the business value they expect out of the system. So what software vendors have done in a smart way is said, well, if waterfall might be the problem, then why don't we go with a faster Agile approach? And that's the mentality and sort of the pendulum swinging the other way. To add to this trend, there's another trend in the entrepreneurial community called lean startups and agile startups and minimum viable products. There's all these trends in the small business space that's focused on speed. How do we do things faster? How do we get products to market faster? How do we get a minimum viable product out there and then get feedback from customers? So there's two trends kind of happening in parallel that are fueling this focus on agile and the focus on speed to value. And that's why Agile has become such a big part of digital transformations today. And it's also a great sales tactic because now software vendors can say, hey, I know our projects have failed in the past, and I know our projects have struggled in the past, but now we have an Agile methodology that'll solve the world's problems. So what I want to do in the rest of this video is talk about how Agile is not, in fact, solving the world's problems. And in many cases, it's creating new problems that we need to be aware of. One of the core tenets or philosophies as it relates to Agile is that we don't want to take a lot of time up front defining our business processes, defining our requirements, defining end-to-end business processes and workflows, because that takes time. It slows down the process of getting technology out there and getting speed to value. So what Agile does, it says we're not going to do that. We're just going to start deploying technologies. We'll find smaller problems throughout the organization and we'll deploy technology to fix it. And we'll get feedback from end users and then we'll tweak it and adopt it and pivot. And we keep going through this iterative cycle. Sounds fair enough, right? But the problem with this approach is most clients we work with, especially larger, complex, and multinational organizations, are trying to standardize their operations. They're trying to get a better view of their end-to-end business processes. They want to improve their end-to-end business processes, and they want to start acting like one company. They already have 10 or 15 or 20 different ways of operating. Now they're using this transformation as a way to say, we want to act like one company. We want to get efficiency gains from having standard business processes. We want to consolidate teams in some cases. So those things all point to the fact that we need to take the time up front to have a strategic direction and have a clear vision of what it is we want to get out of this project, rather than just simply deploying new technology and seeing what happens. So in order for us to have a truly strategic impact on our future state and where we end up as part of our digital transformation, we have to be sure not to take too much of an agile approach, especially early on in the project. We need to take that time up front to define the roadmap, the blueprint, the business process changes, the requirements, all that stuff, because that's what's going to enable us to get the benefits we expect. Now, once we get to the implementation of technology after that, then we can start to introduce agile concepts. I'm going to come back to that point later in this video. But the key is you don't want to start off with a full-on agile approach out of the gates if your goal is to standardize operations or to consolidate operations and to get true end-to-end business value out of your transformation. I talked a moment ago about how Agile doesn't necessarily support the need for strategic direction and focusing on what you want to be when you grow up. And I want to focus a little bit more on that and peel that back a little bit more and talk about business processes, because business processes are one of the key focal points of any digital transformation. Most organizations are trying to improve their processes. They're trying to have some deliberate approach to how they create their new business processes, and they want to ensure that they actually roll out these new business processes as part of their transformation. If we create new technology and just put it in the hands of end users as fast as we can, that doesn't necessarily translate to new or better business processes. So taking the time up front to actually map out and sketch out your future state operating model, your end-to-end business processes, the way you're going to standardize or change the processes, how you're going to integrate processes, how you're going to organize the people around those business processes, That's all part of redesigning your organization and defining what the organization is going to look like in the future. And Agile doesn't necessarily support that. In fact, Agile runs counter to that concept, because if you think about it, what I'm advocating for is more that waterfall approach, where you take the time up front to define your end-to-end processes, define what you want your re-engineered processes to be, and then implement technologies behind that. Whereas Agile would probably flip that around and say, let's get technology out there, and we'll use that as a way to educate ourselves and inform ourselves how we might improve and make our business better. Now, the other part of this too is if we're going to invest heavily in new technologies, which most organizations are when they go through digital transformations, it's not enough to say we're just going to put the technology out there and see what happens and hope for the best and hope that we get business value out of it. Most organizations that our team works with in all countries of the world focus on how do we get business value. If we're going to invest X amount of money in technology, where's the business value? If we don't see the business value, then maybe we don't invest as much in the technology. In order to understand what the business value is, you have to understand what the business processes are going to be in the future and how they're going to change and how they're going to be improved. So all this is to say, you need that time up front, which is very anti-Agile. You need that time up front to define your future state processes, your requirements, and the overall design of the organization and the operations. So if you've listened to this whole thing so far, you might think that I am completely against Agile. I hate Agile, never want to see it anywhere in digital transformation. Fortunately, that's not true. I do think there's a value and merit in Agile, but only in moderation, just like anything. We don't want to double down and go all in on Agile when it doesn't make sense to our organization, but there are ways that we can leverage the value of an Agile mentality. And the key is, where do we use it? When do we use it? How often do we use it? And what's the right timing? That's the key thing. What's the timing for moving into more of an Agile approach? And just to generalize and to summarize, I would say the best way to think about it is if you treat your upfront planning and blueprinting stages of your digital transformation in a waterfall approach, that's going to make a lot of sense, especially if you then shift into an Agile approach. And when you shift into that Agile approach, that's where you can start to accelerate and speed things up. And that's where, by having that clear blueprint and that clear roadmap that you've defined in the upfront stages of your project, that's actually going to enable a better Agile approach that goes faster later on. In fact, I would argue if you took two exact same projects in parallel, run one that's fully Agile, run the other one that starts waterfall, then moves to Agile, the one that starts waterfall and moves to Agile, I would argue, is going to be implemented a lot faster and deliver value a lot faster than the other scenario where you start with Agile. And the reason for that is if you start with Agile, you're sort of going in circles and you're meandering through your project and experimentation and all that stuff that ultimately will take more time and money than if you just took the time to plan and create a clear roadmap up front before you shifted into Agile mode. So that's one way to look at it, is start with waterfall, move to Agile later on. Now, there are a couple scenarios where I would say maybe Agile does make sense from the start. One would be if you're a high growth organization. If you're a fast growing, fast moving technology or a younger company, chances are pretty high that even if you wanted to take a waterfall approach and take that time to define business processes and requirements up front, you wouldn't be able to, because it's like a moving target. You're growing and changing so fast that it doesn't make sense to start off with a waterfall approach. Agile is actually going to serve you a lot better. That's where you want to leverage Agile from the start, because as the company evolves and changes, you can be baking technology into those changes along the way. The other scenario where we see Agile work really well, even in larger organizations, is if you're focused on innovation. If your technology initiative or part of your technology initiative is focused on creating innovative processes and new ways of thinking, those parts of your transformation are very well suited for Agile. So let me start by saying what isn't innovative. If you're implementing a back office accounting system, for example, that's not an innovative use of technology. It might be needed, but it's not innovative. That's a scenario where you probably want to take more of a traditional waterfall and then Agile approach. But if you're talking about, for example, artificial intelligence, an emerging technology that none of us fully understand yet, and organizations certainly haven't figured out how they're going to use AI yet, that's a great candidate for an Agile approach, because we don't know enough about AI and how it could be used in order to create these new business processes. But if we put the technology in people's hands and run some pilots and do some innovative experiments in how we could improve our operations, that's a very Agile approach. So with those newer emerging technologies and the focus on innovation, or those parts of your business that are very innovative, that might be a good candidate for more of an Agile approach. So the bottom line here is Agile can be good, but it can also be bad. It can be helpful, but it can also be destructive. And we need to understand when and where and how to use Agile. And hopefully I've conveyed some ideas on how to do that here today. So that was the clip from my YouTube channel talking about how Agile is undermining digital transformations. Curious to hear what you think, audience. Do you agree or do you agree or disagree? Are there things you would add to the conversation? Love to hear your thoughts here, because I know this is not a widely accepted line of reasoning, and a lot of times people disagree with me on this topic. So I'd love to hear your feedback, both positive or negative here. But what are your thoughts and questions or follow up from watching that video, Darian?
Yeah. So first of all, I think, watching that video, it really challenged some common assumptions. Like you said, it's maybe not the most like widely accepted approach that you have, and lots of people try to, push back and challenge that. But I think it also encouraged, people and companies to have a deeper consideration of how they actually approach their digital transformation strategically. And I think it also helped me understand, the potential risk of adopting agile approach too early in a digital transformation process, and what the risks of that could be, and how that could negatively affect different companies.
Yeah.
So one follow-up question then I have from this would be, for the organizations that have already started with agile approach and are struggling, what steps can they take to incorporate more strategic planning without completely disrupting their momentum?
That's a good question. Yes, you want to leverage what agile stuff has been working, but you may want to add some structure or some more strategic thinking to it. First of all, don't abandon what you've already done. Assuming there's some value there that you've done with the MVP or with your early stages of agile. But while you're doing that in parallel, it's okay to go back and sort of look at your end-to-end processes and start to prioritize and look more strategically at the whole landscape of what it is you're trying to accomplish, and then define your steps forward after whatever, agile phase you might be in right now. And the other thing too is agile is not an all or nothing thing. It's not like you have to decide I'm going to do agile or I'm not. A lot of times it's more how much agile am I going to use, and so for a lot of organizations, if you're starting out, what I would say is do some waterfall-ish type stuff up front, where you do define your end-to-end processes, you define all your requirements, you prioritize requirements, you get alignment on what it is you want as an organization. Yes, that's going to take some time up front. It's going to take time to get that consensus and that agreement and that alignment. But once you do that, then you can sort of shift into agile mode and say, okay, we've got our marching orders. We know what direction we're going. Now let's use an agile approach to start rolling out some of those, phased incremental changes to our technology and processes. So I think that's a way to look at it, is how can we find the right balance that works for us without necessarily having to choose yes or no to agile, which is not, I'm not suggesting say no to agile, but I am suggesting don't go all in on agile, because there is a downside risk, or at the very least, if you do go all in on agile, just recognize that you're creating risks that need to be mitigated, and agile is not a silver bullet to solve all the world's problems.
Right. That makes sense. How do you recommend adapting agile methodologies for industries that are traditionally a little bit slower moving or heavily regulated, such as healthcare or finance?
It is harder for sure to do an agile approach, or to find a way to make agile make sense in a highly regulated or a very mature market. It can be a way to maybe disrupt that slow moving culture you might have. Agile can be a way to sort of speed things up. It could also be a shock to the system, though. So you have to recognize that, it's not going to be smooth sailing just because you introduce agile and call it agile. I don't know, that I have a good answer as far as how exactly to do that. But I think, again, you want to do what's right for you as an organization. And it may be if you're highly regulated, or it may be that if you're a very highly tenured, well-established, mature organization that's pretty set in its ways, it's a little bit harder to change. That's okay. That may not be the right environment to go all in on agile. And maybe you start off with more of a traditional approach and then shift slowly into agile, or, find instances where you can find that small isolated use case that you can be deploying technology quickly and use that as a way to build some momentum, similar to what Brett and I talked about in the conversation earlier in this podcast. You can do that as a way to build some momentum and get some quick wins.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one other question I have with this is more AI based, but for companies that are focusing on, implementing AI and other technologies that are newer, how do you suggest that they approach the initial stages of their digital transformation? Should they consider some waterfall elements before diving into Agile, or what approach do you suggest for those kinds of companies that are focusing on those things?
There's the case for waterfall for a smaller, newer company is that you can design the business the way you want it to be. You can sort of envision how you want it to work. And the thing with Agile is if you just start deploying technology and you don't yet have your processes defined, you don't know what they're going to look like, You could do it by testing and trying new things and then using that as a way to solidify and standardize and document your processes. But you just want to make sure you follow up that agile approach with more of a, waterfall based sort of methodology around documenting and having an end-to-end business processes and business requirements all defined, so that becomes sort of a blueprint for how you grow and scale your company. So I think you might sort of do a reverse order. If you're a starter, a smaller, younger company or a startup, you might start with an agile, but then sort of shift into a waterfall, where then you start to document processes, especially as you learn what's going to work. You learn what technologies and processes are going to stick within the organization. And then you find those high value areas that you want to scale. And then you can say, okay, that becomes our standard process. So then we go back and document and create sort of our standard playbook for how we run the business. So it may sound counterintuitive, but in that case, it may make more sense to sort of flip it around and start with agile, then shift into more of a waterfall mindset after that.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I would like to know, like we said, the audience has a lot of opinions on this topic. So what audience, what do you think about this? And do you agree, disagree, and why?
Yeah, I'd love to hear the feedback here. What do you think about agile? Is it a good thing? Have you seen it work? Have you seen it struggle? What's been your experience with it? I'd love to hear your feedback in the comments wherever you're listening or watching here. Well, great stuff. Well, thanks for all the great content here today, Darian. Thank you to Brett Bobi for joining us as our guest here today. Thank you to the audience for the great questions and user-generated content you helped with here today. And again, you can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday. Go catch all the past episodes you might have missed by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also subscribe and watch and listen on whatever platform you want at that same website. So go check out transformationgroundcontrol.com. In the meantime, we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Hope you have a great week, and have a great week in the meantime. Take care. Did I say that right? Did I say episode number 190? Or did that come out weird?
By launching